You may have realized that being healthy feels different than it did in the past now that you're over 50. If you want to maximize your health potential but don't have time to read through overwhelming pages of Google links, this is the show for you. Welcome to Healthy Tips After 50. We love doing the research, finding solutions, talking to health experts, and learning what works and what doesn't. Now, your host. She spent the last 25 years dedicated to feeling her best and is here to share her best findings with you, Susan Rosen.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen, and my guest today is Michael Hobson. And Michael has a very interesting product that he has worked on, and he's going to tell us about that, and he's going to tell us about how that came about as well, and a little bit about himself. So welcome, Michael, and look forward to hearing all about the backstory on this.
Oh, Susan, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today. And I guess one place to start is what people often ask me is, why water? How did you find your way to water? And it's an interesting story even for me to think about. So just a little background, not that it really matters, but it sets the context, I think. So I was trained as a research economist, and I was professor of economics and taught for a few years, and then left that career and started a new career in the private sector, working in the 80s for what we refer to as the old AT&T, right? Which was still a huge company at the time, 360,000 people worldwide, right? Even after they broke it up. And I was working as a research economist, and eventually ended up at Bell Laboratories. And then decided that after 5 years of that activity, that both the corporation and I would be better off if I were not part of corporate life. And so I then jettisoned from corporate life, and over the course of the last 35 years, have started 11 different businesses. And I'm in the midst now of number 11, 12, and probably 13. So, So the old word serial entrepreneur, I personally think it's madness, but that's what I do. And so we'll
have to compare notes. Yes.
Yeah. So most of my businesses after leaving corporate life were music related.
Interesting.
I owned a vinyl record company called Classic Records back in the day. And I sold that company in 2010, and a number of others, which I won't go into the details of. And then at some point in, let's call it the late 1990s. So I started Classic Records in 1994. In the late 1990s, someone in an interview about records asked me, "So what are you going to do next?" And without thinking, I said, "I don't know, but it has something to do with water." And to this moment, I still don't know why I said that, right?
Where that came from. Yeah.
And so, as time went on, I thought about it occasionally. I was doing a bunch of other things, right? Still music related. And then, one thing led to another, as the old saying goes. And about 10 years ago now, I was given a sign, at least that's the way I interpret it, that was it's time for me to look into this wonderful and mysterious in many ways world.
Yeah.
And so with that prompting, I went on the internet. And even 10 years ago, if you went on the internet and started looking into things related to water, I was literally overwhelmed, right? I was flooded with. And my first thought was, oh my goodness, I could spend the rest of my life just looking at, all these
Uh-huh.
different avenues, right?
Yeah.
So somehow I got onto a video of,
Hmm.
and again, when I say somehow, I look at it now and it wasn't chance. I was being given some guidance, if you will. Was
Okay.
being shown the way that I could choose
Uh-huh.
to follow or not,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
And this might land with some people better than others, but I have a saying that I think I coined, and that is that free will is what happens when you get off the path. So,
Okay.
with that in mind, I think we do have free will, but I think we're all here for some
Uh-huh.
reasons sometimes, right? With a mission, there's a reason why we're here. And we get that opportunity and the wonder of trying to discover that. And I think we're given, signs, and we can choose
Yeah.
to ignore them or to take them up. And in this
Yeah.
particular case, back to the video, I saw a gentleman who's now become a very dear friend of mine. His name is
Hmm.
Gerald Pollack, and he's a
Oh.
world-renowned water expert at the University of
Hmm.
Washington in Seattle.
Uh-huh.
And I was so taken by his scientific look into water, in particular, what its impacts were on biology, right?
Mm.
And I will admit openly, somewhat sheepishly, that at this moment in time, back then, I really wasn't what you would consider to be a great follower of water. Like, it wasn't like, I carried a thermos
Okay.
around, or I
Yeah.
drank
Yeah.
only Evian, or, I admit, geez, I wasn't drinking terrible things. I wasn't drinking sodas all the time and that kind of thing. But, so I said, well, this feels like the right place to dive in and take a look, so to speak,
Uh-huh.
and try and figure it out. So I just called him up on the phone, and he answered the phone at his office. And I said, my name's Michael Hobson, and, I've been watching your videos and so forth, and I've got your book called The Fourth Phase of Water, by the way, for those people that are interested.
Ah.
Highly recommended. You get it on
Okay.
Amazon. And so I said, I've read your book. And he's like, oh, wow. And I said, I'd really like to meet you. And he said, well, as a matter of fact, I'm going to be in Vancouver in a couple of weeks' time, giving a seminar. You could come up. And I said, okay. So I signed up for the seminar. I had no idea what it was. I show up
Uh-huh.
in Vancouver in February, and it's freezing cold, right?
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
Southern
Oh,
California,
yeah.
and it's
And raining,
bitterly cold.
probably.
Now, by the
Mhm.
way, I grew up in South Florida, but I went to
Oh.
graduate school at the University of Minnesota, and I also spent quite a lot of time living in the East Coast in New York City and surrounding areas.
Okay.
So I'm no stranger to snow and cold temperatures. But your blood thins when you either are born and raised as you were, or live like I do in Southern California.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So anyway, I show up and I go to this hotel where the conference is being given, and I'm staying in the hotel. And I go in and I'm like, oh, I'm here. And I said, oh, by the way, what's this about? And they said, oh, it's a convention of massage therapists. And I said, oh, my goodness. And I wondered immediately, am I in the right place? And I said to the woman who was there at the counter, I said, is Gerald Pollack giving a presentation? Oh, yeah, he'll be here in just a little while. So I said, okay, well, what's going to go on here? So I sat down, and it was the most fascinating discussion. I've never heard him give another discussion or a presentation.
Wow.
He's in the Department of Bioengineering at the University of Washington, and previous to his immersion, if you will, in water, he studied muscles and muscle contraction. So he gave a presentation about muscle contraction and the importance of water in that activity. And in fact, what's referred to now as a form of structured water, what he calls the fourth phase of water, which is that water changes its character, right, in different circumstances, in incredibly magical ways that we can talk about. And so I watched this presentation. I was fascinated. I met with him the next day, and another one of those one thing led to another, and
Yeah.
Here I am. And at least that's part of the origin story of how I got interested in or guided to, I like to say, the world of water.
Interesting. Okay. So now you're in the world of water. And how
Well,
did you
at
get
that point I
into
was.
the part of water that you're in now?
Well, yeah. So I guess, and of course, that was a decade ago. So
Okay.
I think from there, I still had, 3 businesses that I was involved in, running and so forth, which I've since sold a couple to the employees and so forth. And so I was in the process of learning and figuring out what my role was to be in the world of water. And again, I meet people that bring me pieces of information and or guide me, if you will, to different circumstances. In fact, one of those people that I met at a water conference told me a story about this interesting water that she had seen. Somebody had shown her, and I said, "Tell me about it." She said, "Oh, it's just this most amazing thing you've ever seen." And I said, "Okay." And so it turns out it was from this spring, and I can show you. Do you see the beautiful crystals?
Oh, yeah.
Those are silica crystals, right?
Okay.
They're dancing in helical fashion. That's what I saw probably 7 or 8 years ago now. And I found my way with her help to the spring in southern Idaho, where this water comes out of the earth at 140 degrees Fahrenheit at a hot springs.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so my partner is the person that owns the spring. And in the course of the last 5 years, we've been figuring out how to do it. And then in the midst of COVID, we brought the product to market. And
I bet. Probably was a hit then, huh? With COVID.
Well, I would say
helpful.
not. I would say not because, everybody was hunkered down, right? People were at home renovating and, doing all kinds of things.
Yeah. But they were on the internet a lot.
They were on the internet a lot. And so that was the beginning.
And they were still buying stuff at the grocery store, even if they weren't actually going inside the grocery store, right? Exactly. They were driving up and driving away with their stuff.
Absolutely. No question about it. There are some challenges with this type of specialty water. And one is that it's in a very remote location in southern Idaho, in the high desert there. And so that remoteness makes it difficult. Like in the winter, they can have 5 to 7 feet of snow on the ground and some inordinate number of days below zero. And there's a reason why not a lot of people live there, because the conditions are harsh.
Okay, that makes sense. So does the water, because I just as an does the water freeze? Does the silica have a that was what I was going to say. Does the silica have some sort of a
goodness no. Yeah, I mean, obviously all water will freeze if it's left in that condition, right? But it comes out of the ground naturally at 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So it never freezes unless it sits, right? So but this spring has been known to Native Americans who used to inhabit that area, right?
Of course.
You know what happened to the Native Americans.
That's not surprising. Yes.
They were all kind of gathered together in what we now call reservations, right?
Yes.
Most of those are some in Utah, but most in Arizona, many in Arizona and so forth, and some in Nevada. I don't think there's not there are some, but not many, I guess, in the Idaho area. So,
I
but
was going to say the Dakotas as well, I think, right?
yeah, of course, and so this spring was known to the natives of that time, hundreds, if not thousands, of years ago, as a healing place, a place where you could go and rejuvenate, like a lot of places where there are hot springs, right? People have known that that hot water is good for us, right? And again, we can talk. I've discovered and understand something about that as well in terms of water and how it affects our biology, right? So
that could be interesting.
I think one of the things that is special about this water is the high silica content, right? So silica is a molecule. It's not an element. Silica is short for silica dioxide, right? So it's a silicon atom coupled with two oxygens, right? So silica dioxide. So silicon is one of those elements, of which there are many, including hydrogen, by the way, that we call them lonely bachelors. That is, they don't like to be on their own. So they find something to couple with. So you don't really find hydrogen on its own, right? You find it bound to carbon. That's why they call it hydrocarbons, or you find it bound to oxygen, which we call water, right? And the same with silicon, right? So in this case, silica dioxide, which, by the way, is the basis for quartz crystal, and it's the basis for sand, right? So in the world that we live in on this earth, if you look at the elements in the Earth's crust, and there's a reason why I'm telling you this, the number one element in the Earth's crust, and I didn't know this, by the way, but it's true, everybody can confirm it, is oxygen. Second is silica or silica dioxide. Third is aluminum, right? Interesting, right? And I'll come back to that in a few minutes. But so it turns out that in geothermic areas, there's an opportunity, not always, but there's an opportunity for the geothermic activity to what's called dissociate hydrogen from hydrocarbons in the Earth's crust. So this hydrogen is out on its own, looking around going, oh, geez, I'm kind of lonely. Let me find something to couple with. What does it find? Oxygen, the number one element in the Earth's crust. And so it binds to oxygen in a heated environment and forms steam. And so the Earth actually makes water, okay? People don't realize it. It's sometimes referred to as primary water, okay? So there's a lot of indication that this water is a form of primary water. So in terms of it never having been part of what we call the hydrologic cycle, so that most water that we consume is the result of evaporation from the oceans, lakes, streams, so on, and then rainfall that comes back down into those same reservoirs, some of which we pump out and purify. Others, it fills up aquifers over time, and we pump those, and that's what we consume. So that's the whole hydrologic cycle. But there is an active activity in the Earth's crust of actually making water. Turns out that, the old phrase, as above, so below. So it turns out that we actually, human beings, make water as well, right? And this is well known. It's called the electron transfer chain inside of our cells. So this molecule, ATP, gets created and it goes through the electron transfer chain. And at the end of it, atomic hydrogen is dissociated. And when the atomic hydrogen finds its a mate in another hydrogen to form H2, it creates heat. And that's how we heat our bodies. And at the same time, there's oxygen present because that's part of what we breathe. And so these H2s that come together and create a reaction that causes heat also produces water and electricity.
Okay.
So it turns out that we're a big water battery. Okay. And we really run on electricity. And what we're doing by consuming food is we're extracting some minerals, but we're also extracting carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
Need hydrogen. There's hydrogen in fats as well. And so you can think of it as a time-released oxidation of hydrogen that results in the production of electricity and water. And that's what we run on.
Okay.
So we make water inside of our bodies, just like is made inside the earth. And so as a result, you will find people in the world, and I always wondered about this. It's like there are people that don't really drink much water, but they eat quite a lot, right? They make their own water.
Oh, interesting.
So you can get away with, I'm not advising people at all not to drink water and instead eat and because there's some other issues around eating too much that are maybe not so good for us, right? So anyway, I just wanted to point that out there's a relationship between the way we think this water's made. Now, I just want to add one of the great things about this water, outside of its purity, which I just spoke to, is that it's high silica content. And what we're finding more and more is that silica is one of those, what we call critical trace minerals for our health and well-being. Okay. So just think about this. Silica is the basis for hair, teeth, bones, our collagen, our extracellular matrix that holds all of us together. It's important for digestion. It actually embeds into the veins and capillaries and arteries in our body to help with blood flow.
Wow.
And with wound healing, it's been shown to be important for wound healing. Now, here's an interesting thing. Two fun facts, that one of which is well known, the other's not as well known. First, that is when we're born, we're about 85% water as infants, babies. By the time we reach the end of our train ride, let's call it through life, we're about 65% water. So you could say, and I do quite often, that the process of aging, you could liken to the transformation from a grape to a raisin, and is coincident with or the same as dehydration. So that's what that's what happens to us over the course of our life, is the process of dehydration. That's pretty well known. What's not known, but is also true, is that we lose silica in that same process. So is there any surprise that the elderly quite often have issues with skin and hair and teeth and bones and wound healing, and with their joints and their extracellular matrix? Is it any surprise?
And their brains.
It's not a coincidence, right? Yeah. Now, with regard to the brain, that you bring it up, remember the third most prevalent element in the Earth's crust, aluminum. We live in what Dr. Exley, who wrote this great book on aluminum, it's called the aluminum age for a reason, because we're surrounded with aluminum, right? It's in pots and pans, it's in water, it's in the air, it's in food. In fact, aluminum is known to be
pipes.
Yes, aluminum's known to be toxic to plants, animals, and humans. Okay, so what plants do is they use silica to bind to aluminum, they sequester it, they encase it so that they don't get inflamed, right?
Okay.
Because they're absorbing,
That makes sense.
nutrients from the earth because they're in
Mhm.
part of the earth and they're, subject to inflammation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Animals and humans, when we ingest aluminum, if we have a sufficient amount of silica, the same thing happens, except we excrete it by sweating or urination.
Okay.
So a couple of little sides there. One is, if you're eating a high silica diet or you're drinking water that has a high silica content, and both of the silica in water is more bioavailable to our gut than the breakdown that goes on in food stuff. No surprise that the foodstuffs that are silica rich are vegetables, fruits, things that grow in the earth, right? Seeds and, nuts and so on. So as we reach elder years and we're depleted of water and we're depleted of silica, no surprise that dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all of which are chronic inflammatory conditions, have started to be related more and more to aluminum toxicity. So,
that makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And so I urge people, to live a longer and healthier life without, losing their mind, so to speak. To, absolutely drink and or eat a silica-rich diet. So that's, if you will, one of the main reasons why I think that Aquene Springs silica, or source water as we call it, is one of the high silica waters that people should be drinking in order to maintain their health and well-being.
So what other common foods, out of curiosity, have higher or some silica in them?
Potatoes.
Okay.
Broccoli. Yeah. Again, things that,
one of my favorites. Yeah.
Right? Things that grow in the earth.
Okay.
And obviously things that aren't, processed. Right.
Yeah.
And even if you're getting things that are processed that have silica in them, they've got some other things that, interrupt that process, I think, of extraction in the gut.
Okay. That makes sense.
So another reason why eating processed food has been shown, I'm not saying anything that's not well known, to not be the best thing for us to be eating.
Yeah. Which also makes sense.
Yeah. And one of the things I think I wanted to mention, we can mention again at the end, is that for your listeners that would like to try Aquene Springs water, they can go to our website, which is aquenesprings.com, and Aquene is AQUENE springs.com. Aquene, by the way, is a native word that means peace, tranquility, and clarity, right? So if they go to the website at checkout and they put in the code HTA50, they'll get a 10% discount, right? So, I encourage people, if they want to try it, if they're curious, to give it a shot and give a little discount as well.
Okay, that's great, and I will put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So spell the
Aquene. Yeah,
Aquene. It's not Aquene.
It's actually pronounced Aquene.
Aquene, right? I know, but I was thinking
QUENE.
Okay. QUENE.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. AQUENE.com.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Well, it's aquenesprings.com.
Oh, Springs.
Yeah,
Oops, forgot that part.
the springs. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
now there's another aspect of water that I want to talk about that we're finding, that I'm finding to be for me a more interesting aspect, right? So there are two ways to think of how we can impact our body, right?
Mm-hmm.
One is from let's call it biochemical approach, right? Which is what we eat, what we drink. You could even lump pharmaceuticals and supplements into that category. And so I'm going to call that the biochemical approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's another way to think of
Excuse me.
the human body as it being a collection of standing waves, of very stable standing waves, which is another way of saying light. So there's a growing understanding, I think. And by the way, I think this was known a very long time ago in ancient times, that the process creation is, by the way, creation not just being our complex bodies, but even the elements here on the earth and the earth itself and other celestial bodies and so forth, that they are condensed light. And that light is really a vibratory pattern. And so that we are really vibratory patterns that have a stability over a certain period of time.
Okay.
Right. And you can then think about the fact that if everything is vibrating, which it is, right? We're spinning. People don't realize this. We're spinning on this earth at the equator anyway, at 1,000 miles an hour, right? We're revolving at 1,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And when
Which
you
is
turn
why we don't fall off.
That's a slightly different story. But, and then at the same time, the earth is circling around the sun, and the entire Milky Way is also turning and not staying stationary, by the way. It is going in a direction, right? So they talk about expansion. So think about this. From moment to moment, we never occupy the same space. I mean, literally, from nanosecond to nanosecond, the vibratory pattern that is us is not in the same place, right? So here we are, we're all vibrating. So it turns out that all of our senses, taste, touch, hearing, smell, all vibratory senses, every single one of them, right? That's a fact. It's scientifically known, right? So when you start to think about this vibratory activity, what happens when you go to an art museum and you see a painting, a beautiful painting, and there's obviously how can you see it? Well, because there's light reflecting off of that. So it's creating a vibratory pattern that we see through our eyes and our retinas, and that gets transferred into an electrical signal. That's also an electrical vibration, right? And that has an impact on us. So there's an example of something in the same thing. If you go out in nature, if someone touches you, they're vibrating, and whatever is going on with them impacts you. When we eat something, when we smell something, those are vibratory activities as well, right? So now we can start to think about the food that we eat, the color of it, because colors vibrate. Right?
Oh, yeah.
That's all part of the spectrum, right? And what we taste, that's vibratory in nature as well. So all these molecules, pharmaceuticals, supplements, they all vibrate too. And that vibratory pattern that they present to this, more complex vibratory pattern have potentially positive, we would judge those as positive impacts, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes there are some, side effects, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of explains that. So that's, if you think about it, the vibratory approach from below, but there's a vibratory approach from above, and that is our thoughts.
Oh, okay.
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 Our thoughts. You could think of our consciousness, our soul, sometimes people call it, or our spirit, as being co-located in this vessel. This vessel allows us to, I call indulge our senses, right? And we're having quite a wonderful experience. And if we look around at all the wonder and beauty that's around us, if we choose to have that interpretation, those what you could think of as good thoughts, harmonious thoughts, loving thoughts, and so forth, then those thoughts have a positive impact on our body, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Now, if we have negative thoughts, or we have anger, or we have fear, or we have revenge or hatred, those are patterns that are not so harmonious. And they end up, I think, and I'm not the only one that thinks this, that they end up in a state inside of us that can lead to what we refer to as dis-ease.
Yes.
Right? There's ease and there's dis-ease. And when you think of it that way from a vibratory standpoint, it starts to make some sense that our thoughts are really important to our health and well-being.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
So how does water impact this? Well, let's not forget, as I said before, by volume, when we're even, not at old age, or, we're somewhere around 75, 77% water by volume. But molecularly, if you count up all the molecules in our body, we're 99.999% water.
Wow.
So water has an incredibly important role inside of our bodies, right? In fact, we are semiconductors. And so we're like biological computers. And what I mean by that is that the structure of water in our bodies is in what's referred to as a crystalline state, right? So if you prick your arm, you don't just squirt water like out of a hose, right? Turns out that the water in our cells is in a very structured state. And, this is a state that Gerald Pollack calls the fourth phase of water. It's a crystalline state of water.
Okay.
It's not ice. It's not in its pure liquid form, and it's not gas, right? And so, for example, water in our cells changes its structure around surfaces, around proteins, around DNA. And so having good water and having water that's structured in the proper way in and around our macromolecules inside of our cells is absolutely critical to our experience of health and well-being. And that situation with the body helps us feel good. Like you get up in the morning and you feel really good and healthy and so forth. And you've got a great mental outlook. We'll call it mental outlook, but our consciousness is really happy. At the same time, if we have beautiful, loving, generous thoughts and activities, then that affects our body from above, right?
Yep.
That creates a state of harmony. So I like to think of us being in a state of some level of harmony or disharmony. And that my objective in life is to be blissful and to be happy. And so that's really about being in as great a situation of harmony as possible. And that is about me eating and drinking good things. But it's most importantly about the way I think about the world, the way I think about myself, the way I think of others, how I interact with them. Now, here's the kicker. right? I've been building you up to tell you how water is important to this. Well, so as I told you, in the body, the water in our bodies is also important for the transfer of information and communication within the cells and between the cells. It's very important for the paths of neurons, right? And communication from the brain to different parts of the body and from different parts of the body, including the gut and the heart, back to the brain. In fact, something people don't know but is true again, that for every signal that goes from the brain to the heart, there are 3 signals from the heart to the brain. So the question is, who's really in charge here, right? And from which come these crazy sayings, which we know to be true, which is live in your heart, not in your head, right? So we already know, and we already know that we say when we come across someone who makes us feel good, what do we say? Oh, that person has a good vibe. I like their vibe, right? We know instinctively that this is a thought vibration oriented world. And I always like to say that what Nikola Tesla told people back in the 30s was that if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, right? And so here's what happens. What is our voice? It's a way to communicate, right? At least on some levels. We know that the voice is a very powerful thing, right? We know from, some very powerful people in our history, some of which have been so good, some of which have been really wonderful. And I'll leave those to people's imagination. But we know that is an important vibratory pattern. And so we also know and are becoming more aware that water can hold that vibratory pattern. And in fact, water that has silica in it, which is the basis for quartz, can hold that vibratory information. So if you have a thought and you speak that thought, what are you doing? It's a vibratory interpretation or representation of your thoughts. So if you say something really wonderful to someone or to yourself, that vibratory activity, expression of your thoughts is something that's harmonizing. So imagine a situation where you take a glass of water, silica source water, and you say to that silica source water something really beautiful, like, I want my body to be filled with love. I want to be filled with beautiful thoughts. I want not to have anything but joy and harmony. And I want my hand to not hurt anymore. I want it to know that I want it to feel great again. That vibratory pattern, which is our intention, comes from our spirit, now gets transferred as a pattern, a vibratory pattern, into that water, and you drink it. And your body knows what that is. All your cells know, because it comes from your consciousness. It comes from your intention.
Yeah.
So that's the magic that I'm really here to tell people about, in addition to the benefits of silica and this primary water, is that this water will allow you to heal yourself if you want to heal yourself. You can, what I do is, I'm constantly striving to have very positive, loving thoughts about everything around me, right? I want to be present. I want to be in the moment. I want to I want all my cells to be excited and happy and blissful, because when they're in that state of harmony, guess what? They don't get diseased. I don't get sick.
Life is much better.
And so it's, if you will, it's a kind of a verbal reminder that we can do. Now, I do think that there are other waters in the world. There are other special waters. Lourdes, for example, in France. There are waters in Mexico that are known to be spiritual healing waters. And I think that's the process. I really do. I think it works. Unfortunately, and I have nothing against municipal water because it's what most people have to drink. Municipal water has been through a lot of treatment. So there's chemicals. Now, what do we now know about chemicals? They're vibrations, right? And those vibrations, right, don't necessarily agree with our biochemistry. So you can see how that could affect it. But at the same time, they're part of a chaotic world, right? And so there's a lot of patterns, chaotic patterns that are in tap water. So I like to say that tap water will keep you alive, but won't necessarily allow you to thrive. And that's what we all want. We want to thrive, right? And so I think that the other thing that's special about this water is that it has that level of, we'll call it vibrational purity, that it hasn't been through all the shocks of our modern world. And so maybe it's a better place to start in that journey of improving our state of health and well-being, of creating a circumstance where we can live a long and healthful life, because no one wants to live a long, unhealthful life, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So,
Nasty.
that's what the water's here for, is to find people or allow people to find it that would like to use it in this way. And, I'm not opposed to the people that think water is water. It's fine for them to think that, and they can think that they can take a lot of supplements and nothing wrong with supplements. Again, I know how they work, and pharmaceuticals are the same thing. They're treatments, right? That do have impacts on people. But I don't want a treatment. I want to thrive.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. So along the lines of what you're just talking about, is there like a minimum amount of this water that you have to drink? I mean, it's not 100% of your water every day, right?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would never say that, you should, I would never try and convince people that, if you don't drink this water exclusively, you're doomed. Yeah. I will say, and I tell people this, be careful, because it's a little bit addicting in the following sense, that it does generally, for most people, have a taste profile and what we call a mouth appeal that is silky. And people talk about it having a slightly sweet taste, although we don't add anything to it. So unlike some waters that have a kind of an astringency to them, this water seems to be one that when you drink it, you sort of want to drink more. And so it may be easier to keep yourself hydrated as a result of it.
Okay.
So that's what I would say. But, when I tell people the most important thing is, yes, you do need to be hydrated, but the most important thing is to have beautiful, loving thoughts. And that's no surprise. I mean, there's lots of people that meditate, and there are lots of self-help people that are talking about feeling good about yourself and about other people, and being in the moment, being present, right? Not living in the past, not, looking forward to the future. It's like, appreciate everything that you have that's right in front of you. Look around, take a minute to be with those people that are important to you, and have those beautiful thoughts. And man, I think that takes you a long way. So you add some good water to that and some good food. Man, it's a nice ride.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds like a good formula.
Yeah. That's what I'm doing. Right. So, if anybody else wants to try it, they're welcome to.
Yeah. It seems to be working for you.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I'm so grateful to be able to come and for you to allow me to share that message with people. And it'll resonate with some people, or hopefully a lot of people. And for those that it doesn't, maybe you'll find your way someday.
Yeah, I know exactly. Well, even if it resonates a little bit and has them become a
Absolutely.
little bit more open and to
Complete.
it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all it takes is one time for somebody to suggest something to us that is the switch. And it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. And I've been
Yeah.
the beneficiary of those moments where people delivered a message. I call them angels. I call all the people that I, run into and interact with. They're angels that are here to help. We're here to help one another have this experience.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay.
Water.
Well, just looked at the time. Okay. So let me, everybody has the information. I'm going to put it also in the show notes.
Right.
So if anybody is didn't get it
Want to give it a try?
Yeah. And if they want to give it a try, absolutely. And I will say, which I always say at the end, which is that neither of us are doctors.
No.
And this is not to be seen as medical advice.
Nope.
Even though it's good advice, but it's not medical advice.
Yeah.
And with that, I will say thank you to my guest.
Bless you all.
And,
thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for being here. And to all of my listeners, I will be talking at you next week.
This has been Healthy Tips After 50 with Susan Rosen. To stay on the cutting edge of the most effective health strategies, subscribe to this podcast and let us know what you thought of the show with a comment or like on iTunes. Visit healthytipsafter50.com for this episode's show notes, more resources, and free offers.